The cart has 3 items in it: a box of steel-cut oats, a replacement filter for the kitchen faucet, and dish soap, because you ran out 2 days ago and have been using hand soap in the meantime, which works fine but leaves a film on the glasses.
That's it.
Not because you forgot something.
Not because money is tight. The month is not tight.
You don't scan numbers at the checkout anymore, that specific anxiety, the mental math, the quiet calculation of what can wait. You are standing in a grocery store on a Wednesday afternoon with $47 million in liquid assets, a portfolio generating just over $380,000 a year in passive income, and 3 items in your cart. The man behind you has a case of sparkling water, a rotisserie chicken, and what looks like an impulse buy, a battery-powered handheld fan he probably won't use twice. He's not thinking about any of it.
He's on his phone.
His cart is just what happened while he walked. Yours is a decision. That distinction, quiet and invisible and unverifiable from the outside, is what you spent the better part of a decade building toward without naming it. It started with a spreadsheet. That's where most things that actually matter start, not in a flash of clarity or some turning point moment, but on a Tuesday night with bad lighting and a cursor blinking in an empty cell.
You were 29.
You had just received a modest inheritance from your grandmother, $34,000. More money than you'd ever held in one place. Not life-changing on its own, but enough to be dangerous. Enough to feel like permission for something without specifying what. You could have upgraded the car. It had 140,000 miles on it and the air conditioning ran warm. You could have put it toward a vacation, a wardrobe overhaul, the down payment on a slightly larger apartment that would have made your life look different to anyone who came over. Instead, you opened a spreadsheet. Not because you were exceptionally disciplined. Not because you'd already figured something out. You opened it because you were genuinely confused about what you were supposed to do with the number, and confusion, for you, has always resolved better with data than instinct.
You typed in categories. What you owned. What you owed.
What came in each month and what went out. Column by column, the shape of your financial life appeared on the screen, and what you saw was not encouraging, but it was clarifying. You were spending around $3,200 a month on an income of $4,100. The $900 difference wasn't going anywhere purposeful. It was dissipating into convenience fees, forgotten subscriptions, the ambient cost of living slightly faster than you needed to. You sat with that for a while. The apartment was quiet.
The screen was bright.
What if the $900 was the actual material? Not the remainder. The thing you were working with. You didn't make dramatic changes. That part doesn't tell well, because dramatic changes have a shape that's easy to narrate. The overnight transformation. The decision that rearranged everything. What you did was quieter and considerably less interesting to watch. You canceled 4 subscriptions you had forgotten existed. You moved the $34,000 into an index fund and didn't touch it. You kept driving the car with the warm air conditioning. You stopped buying things to solve problems that weren't quite problems. Organizational bins for a closet that wasn't actually disorganized. Kitchen gadgets that promised to save 4 minutes of work that didn't really feel like work. You started a habit that felt almost embarrassingly simple. Before buying anything that wasn't a consumable, you waited 72 hours. Not as a rule, not a discipline system. Just as information. You wanted to know whether you still wanted the thing after the wanting had been given time to breathe. Most of the time you didn't. Not because the thing was bad. Not because you were rigidly anti-consumption. Most desire, when examined from a little distance, turns out to be ambient. It was in the air. You walked through it. You picked it up without noticing. The 72 hours cleaned that off. By 33, the index fund had grown to $58,000. You'd added to it every month since the inheritance, not enormous additions, but consistent ones. The car had 185,000 miles on it. You replaced the air conditioning unit for $340, which was the most cost-effective decision you'd made in years and gave you satisfaction out of all proportion to its scale. You hadn't told anyone about the fund. There was no natural moment for it. It wasn't large enough to require disclosure and didn't fit into ordinary conversation. So it existed the way most of the real structure of your life existed, accurately, quietly, without an audience. You started reading about businesses the way some people read about places they want to travel. No immediate plan attached, just building a picture. Laundromats, vending routes, self-storage facilities, the economics of ground leases. You read about what made small businesses fail, which mostly wasn't what people assumed. Not competition or bad markets. Operational sloppiness, undercapitalization, owners who confused revenue with profit and couldn't survive the lag between them. You started looking at the businesses you walked into differently.
Not as a customer.
As someone trying to see the ownership layer beneath. You bought your first piece of real estate at 35. A small commercial condo unit, 1,100 square feet, in a mixed-use building in a secondary market city. A tax preparation office had occupied it for 11 years and showed no sign of leaving. The cap rate wasn't spectacular. The financing was straightforward. The building was not impressive to look at. You paid $112,000. The lease generated $1,340 a month after the management fee.
You told no one.
Not because you were ashamed of the scale. Because you'd noticed, in smaller moments, what happened to relationships when money became visible in them. The temperature changed. The conversation shifted. The person in front of you started relating to a balance sheet rather than a person.
You preferred the person.
So you kept the unit invisible inside your ordinary life.
Same car.
Same kind of clothes. Lunch in a container you'd owned for 6 years. The one with the slightly warped lid that didn't seal perfectly but still worked well enough not to replace. The unit sat in its building, collecting its rent, indifferent to your discretion. The grocery store in front of you now is the one you've used for 9 years.
The layout changed twice.
The produce section moved, then moved back. Arthur, who ran the deli counter, a deliberate person who remembered orders without writing them down, retired 2 winters ago. His replacement is competent but not memorable in the same way. You know this store the way you know a place you have no reason to leave. Your net worth has crossed $47 million. The portfolio, spread across commercial real estate, a self-storage facility you acquired 4 years ago, a small collection of single-tenant net lease properties, and equity positions built steadily since you were 29, generates enough each month that you haven't calculated whether you can afford something in over 5 years. You don't buy more groceries because you don't need more groceries.
The filter, the oats, the dish soap. That's what you came for. The cart reflects that. Precisely.
There is a woman in this store today. You've seen the type, not this person specifically. The cart is full in the aspirational sense rather than the practical one. Specialty items, premium packaging, cheese wrapped in paper instead of plastic. Things that announce themselves. She's well dressed in the way that requires maintenance. The bag on her arm costs more than the faucet filter in your cart by a factor of roughly 300. She doesn't look particularly happy. She doesn't look unhappy.
She looks occupied.
Her attention moves product to product with the low-level intensity of someone filling something without being sure what it is. You don't judge this. You've done versions of it yourself. The years before the spreadsheet were full of exactly that movement. The reaching, the adding, the slow accumulation of things that promise to constitute a life rather than just occupy it. What you understand now, and couldn't have articulated then, is that spending a sensation and spending a strategy are not the same transaction even when they look identical from the outside. Both of you are buying dish soap today. The purchases are not comparable. The self-storage facility was the acquisition that changed the texture of your understanding. Not because the numbers alone were transformative, though they were solid, but because of what running it required you to learn. You bought it at 39. 280 units across 2 buildings in a suburb that had grown faster than its retail infrastructure could accommodate. The previous owner, Denise, a former engineer who had built it from a vacant lot over 14 years, sold because she wanted to stop working and travel. She had enough to do both without any further income. She handed you a binder at closing. Her accountant commented on its organization without being asked. Every lease, every maintenance record, every vendor contract, every dispute and its resolution. 14 years of operational history in a single inch of paper. You read the whole binder the weekend after closing. What Denise had built was not interesting.
That was the point.
A building where people paid monthly to store things they didn't currently need access to. When times were hard, people downsized into smaller homes and needed storage. When times were good, they accumulated more than their homes could hold and still needed storage. The demand was structural, not cyclical. She had refined the operation over a decade. A part-time site manager 3 days a week. Automated billing. A maintenance contractor on retainer. Your practical involvement was monthly financial review and occasional decisions above a dollar threshold you set at the start. The first year it netted $112,000. You did not adjust your life in any observable way.
The checkout line moves.
You place the 3 items on the belt. The cashier, methodical in his scanning, runs them through without ceremony. Total, $23.47. You pay with an ordinary debit card connected to an ordinary checking account stocked with enough for monthly operating expenses and nothing more. The serious accounts live elsewhere, managed by people whose job is to think about them so yours isn't. The cashier says have a good one in the reflexive way that means he's already moved on. You say the same back and mean it in the literal sense. You intend to have a good one. Drive home, make a call about a lease renewal, eat lunch at the kitchen table, walk around the block in the afternoon because the weather is reasonable and minor physical movement seems to improve your thinking in ways that are hard to explain but have been consistent enough to trust.
That's the day.
Ordinary in all its parts. Beneath the surface, undisturbed and unwitnessed, $47 million continues its quiet arithmetic. Your college roommate Terrence visited last spring. You've stayed close across 2 decades and 2 cities. He's perceptive without being pushy, which gets rarer the older you get. On the 3rd evening you sat on the back porch while the neighborhood made its ordinary sounds. He said, unprompted, that he'd been trying to figure out why your house felt different from other houses he visited. He couldn't locate the exact quality. He said it felt like nothing in it was straining. You asked what he meant. He said most homes felt like they were performing something. The objects arranged to indicate a life rather than contain one. Yours just felt like someone actually lived there. The books on the shelf were ones you'd read. The furniture was old enough to be comfortable rather than new enough to be impressive. Nothing on the walls was asking to be noticed. You said that was probably about right.
He didn't press.
He said it seemed like a good way to live. The conversation moved on, and later that night you lay awake thinking about what he'd seen and whether he was right. You kept almost settling on an answer and then finding a small exception, something that complicated it. Eventually you landed more or less on yes, with a caveat that it hadn't always felt like a good way to live, which is different from it not being one. What people misread about deliberate restraint is that they assume it takes constant effort. That every day is a negotiation between desire and discipline. That the person with the ordinary car and the unworn luxury goods is white-knuckling it through a world of attractive alternatives. It's not like that. Hasn't been for a long time. What happened over several years and then more completely, is that the wanting reorganized. Not because of willpower or philosophy. Because you paid close enough attention to your own responses over a long enough period to understand what you were originally looking for when you spent. The feeling you wanted from the expensive thing was never really about the thing.
It was about competence. Agency.
The sense that you understood your situation well enough to act in it purposefully. You wanted evidence that the resources in your hands were being directed rather than dispersed. The expensive thing could approximate that feeling for a few hours. Sometimes longer. But it degraded quickly and needed replacing, which is its own maintenance cost nobody calculates. A correctly structured lease renewal produces the same feeling and keeps producing it, monthly, without requiring anything additional except the initial quality of attention that made it correct in the first place. This is not wisdom. It's a fact about your own psychology that took considerable time and some genuine waste to establish clearly. There's a car in the parking lot. You notice it on the way out because it's designed to be noticed. Extended wheelbase, deep metallic paint that shifts color in the light, aftermarket wheels that add visual weight without improving function. Parked across 2 spaces, which is a choice. You parked in the back of the lot because the space was easy to pull into and the extra distance takes 40 seconds. You're not superior to the car. Not the corrected version of it. You're a different calculation with different variables, arrived at through a specific sequence of experiences that aren't transferable and aren't universal. What you do know, carrying your 3 items toward the 2019 Honda Pilot with 91,000 miles on it and a crack in the rear bumper you keep meaning to fix, is that the car in those 2 spaces is costing its owner something that doesn't appear on the sticker. Not just the payment, the insurance, the depreciation that began the moment it left the lot.
It's costing attention.
The ongoing, ambient attention of maintaining the image the car creates. The outfit that now has to be calibrated against it. The restaurant that now has to be worthy of the parking lot entrance. The social position the car implies, which now has to be populated with corresponding choices, continuously, without rest. You put the oats and the filter and the dish soap in the back. Start the engine. The Pilot asks nothing of you. It runs reliably, parks anywhere, draws no attention in either direction, and only asks you to think about it when it needs oil, which is 4 times a year. Every dollar not maintaining an image is available for something else. That has been the consistent logic for 11 years.
It's not a sacrifice.
The sacrifice was the years before the spreadsheet, when you were paying full price for the appearance of a life. On the way home you pass a strip mall. Coin laundromat in the corner unit. The parking lot is full at 2:30 on a Wednesday afternoon, which tells you the machines are running at capacity during off-peak hours, which suggests either favorable demographics or limited competition in the immediate area. You make a note on your phone. Not an excited note.
A practical one.
An address to run against the county assessor records, a name to find. Maybe it's nothing. The operator is already sophisticated and the cap rate reflects it. The lease has 7 years left with unfavorable terms. The machines are older than they look. There are 100 ways this resolves to nothing actionable. But you stop for 40 minutes on things most people won't stop for 40 seconds on. That gap, unremarkable from the outside and accumulating nothing photogenic or narratable, accounts for most of the rest of it. The dish soap is in the back. The faucet filter will take 10 minutes to install. The oats will last 2 weeks. The portfolio, somewhere in its distributed quiet, is processing another Tuesday. You drive home the same way you came.